Thank you for tuning in this morning. I'm going to start off where I left off last night in John chapter 18 verse 12. Today we're at the Jesus before the Jewish authorities. And then we're going to do a little Bible study on the Jewish laws. Then the band and the captain and the officials of the Jews took Jesus and bound him, and they led him away to Ananias first, for he was father-in-law to Caprius, which was the high priest that same year. Now Caprius was he which gave counsel to the Jews, and it was expedient that one man should die for the people. And Simon Peter followed Jesus, and so did another disciple. That disciple was known unto the high priest, and went with Jesus unto the place of the high priest. But Peter stood at the door without, then went out with the other disciple, which was known unto the high priest, and spake unto her that kept the door, and brought to Peter. Then saith the damsel that kept the door unto Peter, Art thou also one of this man's disciples? He saith, I am not. And the servants and the officers stood there, and he made a fire of coals, for it was cold. And they warmed themselves, and Peter stood with them, and warmed himself. The high priest then asked Jesus of his disciples, and of his doctrine. Jesus answered him, I spake openly to the world. I ever taught in the synagogue and in the temple, whether the Jews also resort, and in secret have I said nothing. Why askest thou me? Ask them which heard me what I have said unto them. Behold, they know what I said. And when he had thus spoken, one of the officers which stood by struck Jesus with the palm of his hand, saying, Answer thou the high priest so. Jesus answered him, If I have spoken evil, bear witness of the evil. But if I have spoken well, why smitest thou me? Now Annas has sent him bound into the Caiaphas the high priest. And Simon Peter stood and warmed himself. They said unto him therefore unto him, Art thou also the one of his disciples? He denied it, and said, I am not. One of the servants of the high priest, being his kinsman, who ear Peter cut off, saith, Did I not see you in the garden with him? Peter then again, and immediately the cock crew. And if you remember earlier, Jesus said he would betray him, and the cock would crow. Now what I'm going to get on today is 21. During the trial of Jesus, the Jewish authorities violated their own law in 21 different ways. The following list provides examples of how Jewish authorities violated their own law. Criminal proceedings was never to be permitted when the proceedings will take place as a result of a bribe. Criminal proceedings are not permitted after sunset and before sunrise. No Jewish judge or Sanhedrin members is to be involved in the arresting of a suspect. No trials will take place prior to the morning sacrifice. No trial is to be held in secret. Trials could not be conducted in the hall of could only be conducted in the hall of judgment on the temple compound. The Gospel of John records that portions of the trial took place in the residence of Annas. Matthew 26:59, the first procedure of any legal proceeding in the presentation of the defense. The accusation comes after the defense. Matthew 29:59, legal proceedings. 26:59, legal proceedings that produce an anonymous decision of innocent are permitted, but unanimous decisions of guilt are not. Testimonies of 2 or 3 witnesses must absolutely be consistent. Matthew 26:61 indicates that the testimony against Jesus was inconsistent. The accused will not have to testify against themselves. Matthew 26:62 records that the Jewish authorities demanded that Jesus make statements that would represent testimony against himself. Jewish authorities were not permitted to rent or tear their garments and create a heightened emotional environment that would unnecessarily provoke those participating in the Jewish proceedings. Charges cannot originate from the word of the judges, but only charges that bring to them. The accusation of blaspheming is only valid when the accused actually speaks the name of God. Matthew 26:65, a person could not be condemned by his own words alone. Matthew 26:66, the verdict could not be announced at night. They announced the guilty verdict within a 24-hour time period. Announcement of guilt by means of acclamation wasn't allowed. Individual votes required to eliminate the influence of the other members upon younger members. Counting would begin when younger and move to the older. Mark 14:64. An unanimous decision of guilt shows innocent because it is impossible for 23 to 61 men to agree without plotting. The sentence could only be announced 3 days after the verdict of guilt. Judges were to remain humane and kind throughout proceedings. A person condemned to death could not be beaten or scorned beforehand. The Jewish Sanhedrin, 71 members, 24 chief priests, 24 elders, 22 scribes, and 1 high priest. In order for a trial to be legally conducted, they had to have a maximum of 23 members present. 13 votes was needed to convict. 11 would be enough to acquit a person. While in custody of Jewish authorities, Jesus suffered some of the highest indignities under Jewish law. Mark 14:65, to strike with the first punishable by fine of 4 denarii. Matthew 26:67, to strike with the palm of hand is punishable by a fine. Matthew 26:67, to spit in the face of a punishable is punishable of a $400 fine. 1 denarius was equivalent to 1 day's wages. And that's just a little bit of history but for you. I hope you've learned something from these Bible studies. Tomorrow I'll be on finish out this part of do another part of the Bible study that goes with it. But first I'm going to do this altar call song for you. It's Uncommon Me. If you're listening on Facebook, on YouTube, you can look it up. But for you that's listening live, we'll be able to hear it.